This week on To the Contrary.
First, why this Labor Day older women need not apply. Then, the president gets a failing grade on female cabinet appointees. Behind the headlines, the Family and Medical Leave Act turns 20.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, when age and gender work against your job search.
This Labor Day, one demographic having an incredibly tough time finding work is women 50 plus. The Census Bureau reported in 2011 that almost 47% of men age 55 and older were in the civilian labor force, but only 35% of women were. Unemployment and underemployment is especially prevalent among midlife and older women. The Older Women's League reveals that for men 55 to 61, just more than 7% are underemployed. For women in the same age group, the percentage jumps above 20. Experts point to many factors, including an incredibly tight labor market, many women having taken themselves out of the workforce to raise kids or care for elderly relatives, age discrimination, and employers dodging older workers because they think they're more expensive and less productive.
So, Nikki, in your experience, why do you think women 50 plus seem to be having so much of a harder time finding jobs?
Well, I think everyone is still having a hard time finding employment. Look at unemployment rates for young people under 25, for minorities. Everyone is still struggling, very, very much so. The economy is recovering, but everyone is having problems.
Older women are sort of the first casualties, though, because women are overrepresented among the lowest paid workers. They have this extra burden in our society that doesn't provide a lot of support for caregiving. And, you know, it turns out twice as many retired age women are in poverty as men. So there's no doubt that women are taking it in the jobs.
It's a tough economy for all workers. And since men got harder hit at the beginning of the recession, we're seeing them bounce back faster than women.
Well, it's a very competitive workplace. It's a fast-changing workplace. So you have workers hiring younger people because they're cheaper and they may be up to date in the skills. And on top of that, you have discrimination. Is a bad formula for older women.
One thing I keep hearing from, one of the reasons we decided to do this story is I have half dozen friends right now in the situation of having had great careers early on and having gotten out of the workforce mainly to raise children, coming back in their 50s plus, and they're sending out 200 resumes and not getting an interview, including one I know who was a lawyer, went to Yale undergraduate and Columbia Law School. She can't, and was with a big firm earlier on, can't get an interview. Now what they're telling me is, with computerized screening of resumes, you may as well not apply for any job where you don't have a personal connection. Is that what because the resume screen for age?
Yeah, the New York Times actually had a really fascinating long article a few weeks ago where they looked at a bunch of women who 10 or 15 years ago they interviewed who had chosen to opt out of the workforce. They checked back in with all these women, and almost all of them regretted doing so, which was really fascinating to me. The ones who had been able to successfully transition back into the workforce were ones that had leveraged their personal networks and had really gone out and had hustled and made those personal connections where you can circumvent those systems.
And again, I mean, older women have it harder because they have sort of the gender discrimination aspect of it, but older men also have it really hard. And I think the difference is when women leave the workforce, you don't accumulate. So it's very hard to go back at the same level, almost impossible.
I mean, is the message here, don't get out? I mean, you're pregnant with your first child. Are you going to get out of the workforce for a while after?
No, but I have the luxury of my mother is moving in with us. My mother, who is an older woman who has not been able to find a job, will be helping us take care of our child. Childcare is very expensive. I mean, there are so many different factors that have made it very difficult for women in the workforce overall.
And that's, I think, the most important issue, is that this is a quality of life issue. And the fact is women and men want to have a life. And we are in a workforce now where people are really in a stripped-down situation. They're being pushed very, very hard, and they're being told you're lucky if you have a job. And we have not solved this problem of women moving into the workforce in massive numbers and not just providing free care at home so that men can have a career. That's not the case anymore, but our society has not caught up. So, you know, it's not just, it would be nice to stay home and take care of my kids. It's that, as you say, childcare is incredibly expensive. We don't have a public structure that allows for people to have things like paid time off, and half of women can't even take a day off to take care of a sick child in this country. I mean, we have a very brutal economy.
Okay, but you're looking at it from a different perspective. I look at it that you, and of course you have 3 children, and yes. I am child-free by choice, but I feel
like louse-free. Not that you're not friendly to children.
But one of the reasons I didn't have kids was I couldn't have afforded daycare. I mean, there were lots of reasons, but I feel that you need to prepare yourself before you have a child to make sure.
To make it on individuals is not the
Ruth,
answer.
let me finish. To make sure that you have available childcare, that you can afford it. If you don't, and if you can't create some co-op or have a family member move in, you shouldn't be having them, because you are going to end up 55 and trying to get back in the workforce and not being able to.
That's
and you shouldn't be surprised.
That's not a viable answer for our society as a whole. We can't say, you know, let's let children starve to teach women a lesson. We need to take care of kids.
No, it's
and
not. Excuse me, please. First of all, there are many reasons why you are dead wrong. I'm sorry.
No.
But the first is, marry a guy or be with a guy or a partner who's going to do half the work. That gets rid of a large amount of need for the daycare. Go ahead.
Well, my point, Bonnie, is that we may want to have that discussion, and you may have some valid points, but that's not the reality of our society and our economy. Women are having children. We need to have children to sustain our economic
Women
growth.
want to have children.
Women want to have children.
We want to have families.
We need to ask ourselves, as the country, what are the policies we have in place in order to really use in full potential our workforce. And what we have is a pool of older women, incredibly capable, incredibly skillful, that probably have learned incredible skills while taking care of their children that we're not utilizing.
Well,
so what can we do?
I want to get Jennifer.
There's a win-win opportunity here for businesses that are having a hard time making it, being able to define projects that would allow those who are coming back into the workforce, who have a set of skills and experience that might not fit into the box of a full-time employment. There are all kinds of entrepreneurial opportunities for these women who have the life experiences that are going to be valued by employers. Marketing that and women connecting and empowering one another to do that, I think, is one open field here.
Okay, and we are out of time. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay. From women looking for jobs to women in Obama's cabinet.
Is anyone surprised? A report out this week shows the Obama White House has done a stunningly less impressive job of appointing women to cabinet-level posts than its most recent Democratic predecessor, the Clinton administration. A New York Times survey compared female cabinet-level appointments by the last 3 administrations. It found that women currently hold about 35% of cabinet-level posts, compared with 41% during the Clinton administrations and 24% during the George W. Bush years. Do women have a right to expect more, even much more, from President Obama? Without their support, he would not have been elected in the first place, nor re-elected in the second.
Your turn.
Absolutely. I think women have a right to expect more, and I think they did expect more. And seeing the second term with the boys' club reasserting itself is really discouraging. And nowhere is it more discouraging than in Larry Summers' prospective leadership at the Fed. I mean, Larry, girls can't do math. Summers, really? The architect of financial deregulation and the economic crisis in this country, not to mention, has complete contempt for the women who have worked under him, including, let's never forget, Brooks Lee Bourne, who tried to warn Larry Summers and Ellen Greenspan and Robert Rubin about the impending financial crisis, and they were incredibly sneering and mocking and undermining of her. So can we see some progress here, not just for women, but for our whole country?
I don't think that Americans, by and large, think in terms of quotas. But it is ironic that an administration that tends to think in quotas begins to be caught on its own argument and not living up to what it professes to believe.
Well, let me say this. I agree. It would be better to have more women in the category of the administration, the different categories that you can look at to the performance in terms of female appointments of this administration. He leads dramatically on judges. 42% of the judges is appointed, and I think compared to 30-some% with Clinton. In the overall administration, not just the White House and certain key positions, he also is 43%. So he is ahead of the game by a lot of other measurements, not this very specific one, which are high-level positions that are not cabinet level, because the cabinet level, he's also at the highest levels. It's these categories that will include the chair of the Fed. So, yes, he could do better. I would like to see Janet Yellen, the vice chair of the Fed, to be appointed. I think it will be intriguing to have a female as the head of the Fed, but to say that Obama has not performed in terms of female appointments, I think over the board.
But wait a second. I think Ruth had a really good point on that when you look at his second term, I mean, his first term, because he ran the first time and wanted to win a second time, he did a much better job. And he's basically said, the heck with you to women in his batch of second appointments. And he broke no new ground. And you may say that there are people who, you know, Americans don't care about quotas. Great. But you know what? The women who elected him do want to see a payback. You know, he didn't get the white married women's vote. That always goes Republican. But he got everybody else, older, white widows, single white women, single women of color, married women of color.
But I think this is...
And they are looking at these things, and they do care.
But this is an inside the beltway kind of debate. Most Americans are concerned with the kinds of decision that cabinet office holders are making. That's what they're concerned about, not the identity politics that we're talking about inside the beltway.
I think there was a lot of hope with the Obama administration that we were talking earlier in the show about just the whole sort of grotesque sexism of the Republicans in this last election and how much it cost them. And I think, you know, with Obama, you saw this idea of this progressive future that was multiracial and that was gender equal. And it's disappointing to see that behind the scenes, what you have is these same white guys running the show.
I think Americans want very qualified people. I mean, look at how amazing Hillary Clinton was, regardless of gender. She was terrific. I think people want really highly qualified people. I'm Japanese Irish. There are no Japanese Irish in the cabinet. I'm a little bit offended. But I think people want to look beyond that. And, I mean, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable to defend the Obama administration, but he has been very fortunate in that he has been able to go and tap people for these cabinet-level positions, a lot of whom got their start and came up through the ranks under the Clinton administration. So I think Democrats have come from a place where there is a much deeper bench, and that's something that I think Republicans really need to build upon.
This argument of qualified people it drives me to insanity because at that level, everybody's qualified. Right. You know, the pool of qualified people includes plenty of women. So that is not
the Patricia,
reason.
that is just the argument that some people are hearing about Janet Yellen. And as vice chair of the Fed, as somebody who's been written about as being a much more collaborative thinker, Summers makes rash, quite frankly, stupid decisions. He was drummed out of Harvard University. He is a very self-important kind of guy, and he may be brilliant, but he's abrasive, and you don't even want somebody like that in the running the Fed whose position really controls the U.S. economy.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I totally opposed to Summers' appointment, and I was incredibly disappointed when he's pushing his nomination. But I don't want to use that to say then Obama is not appointing women and Obama is insensitive to women, because that's not the case. His policies are not insensitive to women. He's appointed plenty of women. He could do better, absolutely. But Larry Summers, for me, is a completely different discussion.
We need more Elizabeth Warrens to break up that boys club, because look where it's gotten us. I mean, really, it's the insider nature of it. I mean, that's why it's not quotas. It's not, some kind of PC thing. It's like, let's get these guys who've had a hammerlock on power and trashed our economy.
Well, and one last thing is Obama in January of this year, the New York Times ran a piece in the Oval Office when he had all his top congressional advisors in the Oval Office. It was obviously late night or weekend. They were all in jeans and casual outfits. There were 10 guys, and all you could see was domestic advisor Valerie Jarrett's leg behind the guys. And he was drawn, because of that photo, he was drawn into the argument and said, wait, don't, wait until I've done all my appointments. You haven't seen it yet, blah, 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 blah. And really, since then, has he made up for it?
No, and I think the point that the Clinton administration really gave him this bench to work with is really the relevant point, because there is this incredible pool of talent there. And yes, it's true, judicial appointments are looking better, and there's this kind of second tier of women, but at the top, they're just passing about.
Yeah, and I have to agree. I wish he would do better at the very top. Absolutely.
All right. Behind the headlines, balancing work and family life for most Americans is tough. With the Family Medical Leave Act earning 20 this month, Working Mother Media's president, Carol Evans, says unpaid leave is a good start, but families need more.
It's just been a slow, impossible grind. We haven't been able to move the needle very much. FMLA has really helped women tremendously, but without the mandate of paid leave, it creates huge inequality.
The length of a woman's maternity leave depends on her financial situation.
Women are not able, in many cases, to take the full 12 weeks of mandated maternity leave because they can't give up their paycheck. The lower the income, the less likely she is to be able to take kind of minuscule kind of time that FMLA offers.
Evans says as a result, these women lose time with their newborns.
They have to go back to work before they've bonded with their child, before they've recovered from the birth of their child, before they're psychologically ready to walk out the door and leave that child in care of someone else.
California, New Jersey, and Rhode Island provide partial wages to new moms using a variety of payroll tax and insurance programs.
Women are being offered, on average, 7 weeks of paid maternity leave at the best companies, 5 weeks of adoption leave, and 3 weeks of paternity leave. The big statistic that you want to keep in mind is that only 16% of all companies offer any paid maternity or paternity leave.
When new parents take paid or unpaid leave, companies must pay to replace them.
Companies, they have to replace the person's time for those 12 weeks or whatever they're giving, or they have to do workarounds, which is very, very common. And there's a whole new job category of maternity leave replacements.
Evans says it's critical to make companies aware of the difference between what they give employees and what they get back.
When a company offers a full, strong maternity leave policy and paid, and the woman goes out and takes her 12 weeks, what they get is a person who comes back strong, ready to work, with all their knowledge and all their experience intact, and very dedicated and loyal to that company.
Evans wants employees to pay into a company fund. If employees need to take leave, they'll draw a percentage of their salary from that fund. And to speed up the process, she's launched a petition drive.
We all thought that mandated paid leave was the next step. We thought it might take 2 or 3 years when this was passed 20 years ago. And the fact that it hasn't passed is pretty appalling to all of us. We have a petition on workingmother.com. And the petition is for women and men, everyone, to sign, to request, demand that Congress pass paid leave.
Evans says it's embarrassing that the United States is one of 3 countries in the world without paid leave. She says change is all about percentages.
Women are still only 20% of Congress. I mean, it's a big hooray. Hooray, we're 20% of Congress. It's also an appalling number. We're 50% of the population. We're 50% of the workforce. We're more than 50% of the college graduates, but we're 20% of Congress. And we all celebrated when we reached 20%, because that's a milestone. But we have very little power in this country politically. For the mandated paid leave to pass, we really have to get a lot more women into Congress.
So Jennifer, what's the answer here? I mean, what's the answer to this question of how do we help women take leave when they have children. And is there a federal tax needed, a federal program, or as she mentioned, should it come from corporations?
Well, you know, I don't think that a federal mandatory one-size-fits-all approach to this is going to be in the best interest of employees or employers. We need to create an environment in which employers and their workers can come together on agreements that work and can be most customized to the needs of working moms. That's going to allow the kind of approach that will best serve her needs.
Well, I have to say, voluntary answers are okay until you're in need of the of the benefit. And I was listening to the debate while it was going on in New York City, in which they were trying to authorize, and they actually did pass the paid leave. And the main issue was that people were going sick to the workplace, so they were putting the larger population at risk because they felt they had no choice if they didn't have the paid leave benefit. So it's a very critical issue for the larger community, not just for the individuals.
And it's interesting, I mean, 9 to 5, the Working Women's Group has done a lot of work on that, pressuring local communities, having referenda, overwhelming support in places like Milwaukee and New York to provide some basic medical coverage and family leave for low-income working folks, partly because we don't want our burger flippers to be communicating their diseases to us because they have to go to work sick, because half of women can't take a single day off when they have a sick child, and because of the incredible pressure it puts on families that little tiny babies have to be left in this completely privatized child care system. There's no guarantee that they're going to be well cared for. In fact, the quality of care that's available is really low. People are under too much stress.
So you think the answer is city, state, federally subsidized daycare?
And the other thing that I think is that this is very similar to the minimum wage argument. I mean, you can argue that, well, the government should just be hands-off, this should be a private, you know, that is an increasingly hard argument to make and win in this really strapped workforce environment. So the minimum wage has gone down by 31% in real dollars since I was born, and the top 1% are making 110% more. This is a values issue, and it's a how are we allocating resources issue. It's not an issue of just scarcity. We actually can have a minimum wage workforce that can make a living wage, and we actually can provide people the basic support so that they're not going to work sick and tiny babies are not in the basement with the teenager next door while their parents work 2 jobs.
I think the thing to keep in mind is that the workforce is very diverse. So what works for a freelance journalist is not going to work for an hourly employee, is not going to work for a lawyer, is not going to work for someone who works for a corporation. I love to hear Ms. Evans.
Isn't it generally true, though? I mean, we're talking upper income, certainly women don't have a problem.
Right.
Middle income women, you know, do somewhat, but really the people, the burger flippers, the you know, home health care aides, the hourly wage workers with no benefits and no paid vacation, they're the ones with the big problem here.
They are the ones with the problem here, and but what is the value of their time? Is it, I mean, where is that coming from when we give them paid leave? That's coming from their corporation. This is not a free program. So you have to replace that employee for a period of time. You have to guarantee that they'll get their job back. You have to guarantee them their health care under the provisions of the FMLA. And so that's something where it tacks onto the cost of hiring each employee, even if it's someone who's making $8.25 an hour. And so you're creating a disincentive then to hire these people in the future. And I think with unemployment as high as it is in those lower income levels, you're really just hurting, you're disincentivizing women even further.
Well, you know, there's great counter research in the fast food industry in a collection of cities on the East Coast about that shows that actually higher wages at the very entry level cause much lower turnover and much higher demand. I mean, people have money to spend, and that is an economic stimulus, so that the economic effects.
Let's get back to family and medical leave.
The economic effects of not having a high turnover, super stressed out, on the edge workforce are actually good for the economy as a whole. But we can do this.
To get back to FMLA, my preference is for corporations, individuals, companies, employers, employees to work this out. I'm about to go on maternity leave right now, and I am covered by a private short-term disability policy. And that's something where a single person doesn't have to bear the cost of me taking this leave, an unmarried person. So this is the kind of thing where I'm internalizing it, I've been paying into it, and I would much rather have that happen than have it be something that's spread across all taxpayers.
The problem with just a voluntary solution, and I'm glad it's working for you, is that the corporations want to have a lower tax base. That means that they're going to have to be able to sustain these issues. They have the responsibility. They're the ones hiring people. So we cannot, and the numbers show that voluntary options are not working because you have a large percentage of people without coverage.
But, you know, actually state-funded programs aren't working either. In California, where they paid 55% of a person's wage paid leave for a number of weeks, women weren't taking it because 55% of their wages wasn't enough to live on.
Well, to say it's not working when you are telling a minimum wage
Nobody
person
was
makes
using
$15,000 that they need to live on $7,000 with a child in order to take advantage of the program, it's kind of like the healthcare option where you make $15,000, you can pay $10,000 for health insurance, but nobody takes it, so we might as well not provide the health insurance. I mean, it doesn't work because it's not enough.
Okay, and we are out of time. That's it for this edition of To the Contrary. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay and at To the Contrary, and visit our website pbs.org/tothecontrary, where the discussion continues. Whether you agree or think to the contrary, please join us next time. What's going to